A map can hold a secret that outlives its maker by 1,000 years. We are about to examine 25 mysterious maps that captured continents long before modern geography was born. By the end, you will see the entire history of human exploration in a startling new light. How could an admiral in Constantinople sketch a continent buried under miles of ice? Why does a chart from the Age of Knights appear to show the coast of America? These artifacts are more than paper and ink. They are frozen arguments from the past, challenging everything we assume about who knew what and when. What does it mean when the world you think you know is drawn completely differently by someone from centuries ago? The true mystery begins not with a blank space on the map, but with a line drawn in the wrong place at the wrong time. To understand why these 25 charts are so unsettling, we need to first ask, what exactly makes an old map mysterious? It is rarely just about age or beauty. The core of the intrigue lies in the presence of anachronistic knowledge. This is when a mapmaker includes a geographical feature, a coastline, or an entire landmass that, according to the official history of exploration, should have been completely unknown to them. Imagine a monk in a medieval scriptorium carefully inking the rough outline of a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 200 years. That is not a simple mistake, that is a profound question etched in parchment. Scholars sometimes refer to these clues as cartographic fossils. Just as a stone can preserve the shape of a long-vanished creature, these maps may be preserving information from much older, now lost sources. They are echoes, perhaps they are copies of copies, tracing back to the logs of forgotten sailors or the archives of ancient libraries that did not survive. The map we hold is not the original source, it is the final, fragile whisper of that source. This leads to the delicate art of interpretation. Where is the line between a lucky guess, an artistic flourish, and verifiable, inexplicable data? A mapmaker might sketch a vast southern land out of philosophical belief because ancient thinkers said it must exist to balance the world. That is not a mystery, that is theory. But if that sketched land matches with startling precision the actual subglacial topography of Antarctica, something very different is happening. The mystery deepens when the map's accuracy can be measured against the modern world, revealing details that bypassed all known routes of discovery. This foundational idea transforms our view. We are not looking for errors, we are examining potential evidence. Each map becomes a silent witness, and our task is to listen to what it has been trying to say for centuries. The first of our 25 puzzles materialized in the dusty archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. It was a fragment, a torn piece of parchment that would ignite a century of fierce debate. Drawn in the year 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this map presented a world both familiar and impossibly strange. On its western edge, it shows a rough but recognizable coastline of South America, a feat remarkable enough given it was drafted just 2 decades after Columbus's first voyage. But it is the southern edge of the map that plunges us into deep mystery. Below the Atlantic, the chart depicts a landmass with bays, rivers, and what appears to be a mountainous terrain. Piri Reis himself wrote notes on the map, stating he had compiled it from many source charts, including some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. The most shocking interpretation put forward in the mid-20th century by historians like Charles Hapgood is that this southern continent is Antarctica. Not the ice-bound continent we know, but a rendering of its actual subglacial coastline, the shape of the land beneath miles of ice, knowledge supposedly inaccessible until the modern era of seismic sounding. This claim suggests a prehistoric civilization with advanced seafaring and cartographic abilities. a civilization whose maps were copied and recopied until a trace survived in an Ottoman admiral's study. Mainstream cartographic history offers compelling counterarguments. Many scholars see this land not as Antarctica, but as a speculative extension of the known world, a common practice of the time. It could be a misplaced representation of Tierra del Fuego, or part of the long-held theoretical continent of Terra Australis, drawn from philosophical belief rather than direct knowledge. The rivers and bays could be artistic guesswork, not hydrological data, yet the precision of the fit, when overlaid on modern subglacial maps, remains a haunting coincidence for those who study it. The Piri Reis map serves as our perfect entry point into this enigma. It forces us to confront the core question head-on. Are we looking at a spectacularly lucky composite of guesses and misunderstood reports, or are we seeing the faded fingerprint of a lost chapter in human exploration, a chapter written not in history books but on maps that should not exist? The debate over the Piri Reis map was still simmering when another document emerged to shatter the timeline completely. In the year 1965, a quiet announcement sent shockwaves through the worlds of history and cartography. A previously unknown map had been presented to Yale University, a simple parchment that seemed to hold a secret capable of rewriting the discovery of the Americas. It was called the Vinland Map. At first glance, it appeared to be a fairly standard medieval rendering of Europe, Asia, and Africa. But in the upper left corner, in the vast Atlantic Ocean, it depicted two large islands labeled as Vinland. Accompanying text described this land as having been visited by Bjarne and Leif Erikson, Norse explorers from Greenland. If genuine, this was not just a map, it was a smoking gun, a pre-Columbian European chart of part of North America. Its provenance was a story in itself, said to have been found bound inside a 15th century book. The timing was explosive. Just a few years later, in the 1960s, archaeological excavations at Elance Ox Meadows in Newfoundland would confirm a Norse settlement, proving the Viking sagas were not just legends. The Vinland map seemed to be the perfect cartographic corroboration, drawn centuries before Columbus set sail. It was hailed by some as one of the most important historical discoveries of the century. Yet almost immediately, whispers of doubt began. The mystery of the Vinland map is a duel not between continents, but between centuries. Is it a genuine artifact from the 1400s, or a brilliant forgery from the 1900s? The battle has been fought not in libraries but in laboratories. Initial studies of the parchment and binding seemed consistent with the medieval period. But the ink told a more complicated story. Early analysis suggested it was an iron gall ink, common for the era. The true controversy erupted when scientists began using more advanced tools. They found traces of a titanium compound called anatase within the ink's yellow lines. While a tiny amount of anatase can occur naturally, the specific crystalline form detected was, according to some experts, indicative of a synthetic pigment not commercially produced until the 1920s. This finding pointed squarely toward a modern creation. Proponents of the map's authenticity countered fiercely. They argued the anatase could have come from medieval sand used in the ink-making process, or from contamination over centuries. They pointed to the map's stylistic consistency with other known works and the sheer, daunting expertise a forger would need to replicate every nuance of medieval craft. The debate has seesawed for decades, with each new scientific paper from one side met with a rebuttal from the other. This transforms the map's mystery into something deeply philosophical. Its power lies not in what it undoubtedly shows, but in the profound question it forces us to ask. What is more compelling, the tantalizing possibility of a rewritten past, or the sobering evidence of an elaborate hoax? The Vinland map stands as a cautionary tale and a mesmerizing puzzle. It teaches us that sometimes the most mysterious thing about an ancient artifact is not where it came from, but when it was truly made. While the debate over the Vinland map hinges on authenticity, another chart presents a different kind of riddle entirely. It does not ask if it is real or fake, but rather, what on earth is it actually showing? In 1558, a Venetian nobleman named Niccolo Zeno published a map and a narrative that would haunt Atlantic cartography for over 200 years. He claimed it was based on the lost accounts and charts of his ancestors, the Zeno brothers, who had undertaken a daring voyage to the North Atlantic in the late 1300s. The map they produced was a captivating puzzle. It showed a familiar Scandinavia and Iceland, but then it populated the icy seas with lands that have no place in our modern atlas. Most prominent was a large, detailed island south of Iceland called Friesland. To its west lay Estetiland, and further still, a place called Drogeo. These were not faint specks, but fully realized territories with coastlines, place names, and inland features. For generations of explorers and mapmakers, this was not a mystery, it was accepted geography. The Zeno map was copied, referenced, and treated as authoritative. The great cartographer Gerardus Mercator included Friesland on his influential world map. When the English explorer Martin Frobisher sailed in the 1570s, he believed he had rediscovered and claimed Friesland for the crown, when in reality he was likely off the coast of Greenland. This is where the true intrigue lies. The mystery of the Zeno map is not about a deliberate forgery, but about the powerful life of a geographical misunderstanding. Did the Zeno brothers or their descendant Niccolo actually have access to genuine reports from a 14th century expedition that got hopelessly lost and confused in the North Atlantic? One compelling theory suggests that Friesland is a mismapping of the Faroe Islands, blown out of proportion by fog and fear. Estetiland could be a garbled account of Labrador or Newfoundland, heard from Norse settlers or encountered by chance. Drogeo might reflect whispers of more southern lands, all stitched together into a single, flawed narrative. The islands persisted because they filled the blank spaces on the map with plausible detail, and because the Zeno family name carried weight. They became cartographic ghosts, influencing real voyages and real decisions for centuries. This phenomenon shows us that a map's power does not come solely from its accuracy, but from its story. A compelling narrative, even a confused one, can shape reality more forcefully than an empty sea. The Zeno map challenges us to wonder how many phantom lands still linger in our collective understanding, not as ink on parchment, but as unquestioned ideas that guide our journeys into the unknown. While phantom islands like Friesland were fading from belief, a far more consequential map was being smuggled out of Lisbon under the cover of diplomacy. The year was 1502. Portugal, under the visionary guidance of Prince Henry the Navigator, had turned the Atlantic into its private laboratory of discovery. Their ships had painstakingly charted the west coast of Africa, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and opened the sea route to the riches of India. This knowledge was a state secret, a form of intellectual property more valuable than gold. It was in this climate of intense espionage that Alberto Cantino, an Italian agent working for the Duke of Ferrara, managed to commission a breathtakingly detailed world map from a Portuguese cartographer. The Cantino Planisphere, as it became known, was an act of theft that gave the rest of Europe its first clear, clandestine glimpse of the Portuguese discoveries. Here was the African coast in stunning, accurate detail, a direct rebuke to the vague and fanciful depictions that had come before. Most significantly, it shows a long, recognizable stretch of land in the South Atlantic, labeled Vera Cruz and later Brazil. This is one of the very first cartographic records of that continent, drawn just 2 years after its official discovery by Pedro Alves Cabral. The map is a masterpiece of empirical observation, a triumph of the new age of exploration. Yet, in the cold northern waters of the Atlantic, the Cantino Planisphere holds a curious secret. Sitting in the ocean far to the west of Ireland, it depicts a large, circular island labeled High Brazil. This was not a new discovery, but a very old dream. The island of Brazil was a phantom rooted deep in Celtic myth, a promised land of eternal happiness that was said to appear cloaked in mist only once every 7 years. Its presence on such a scientifically advanced map is the true mystery. It represents a fascinating cognitive dissonance in the Renaissance mind. On one hand, the mapmaker is meticulously recording verified coastlines from the latest captain's logs, pushing the boundaries of known geography with ruthless precision. On the other hand, he faithfully includes a legendary island from medieval folklore, giving it the same visual weight and certainty as the coast of Africa. This is not an error, but a reflection of a world in transition. The process of mapping the globe was not a clean, linear replacement of myth with fact. It was a messy, overlapping dialogue. The old stories held immense power, providing a template for understanding the new and terrifying emptiness of the ocean. When sailors reported strange shores in the Atlantic fog, it was natural to fit them into the existing story of High Brazil. The Cantino Planisphere captures that exact moment when two worlds coexisted: the emerging, evidence-based world of the navigator and the enduring, story-based world of the storyteller. It reminds us that every new reality must first be understood through the language of the old fantasies it seeks to erase. While the Cantino map blended myth with new coastlines, a single sheet of paper printed in a small German town would make a declaration that echoed for centuries. In the year 1507, a cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller published a work that did more than depict the world, it attempted to define it. His large world map and the accompanying globe gauze and book are collectively known as the Waldseemüller map of 1507. Its historical significance is monumental and clear, for it is the very first document to use the name America for the lands across the Atlantic. In a tribute to the explorer and navigator Amerigo Vespucci, whose published accounts portrayed the new lands as a separate continent and not part of Asia, Waldseemüller labeled the southern landmass America. He wrote, "I see no reason why anyone should justly object to calling this part America. After Amerigo, its discoverer, a man of great ability, the name stuck, forever changing our global vocabulary." But the true cartographic mystery of this map lies not in its labels, but in its breathtaking and inexplicable geography. Look at the western edge of this new continent, America. Waldseemüller drew it with a coastline, and then, beyond that coastline, he depicted a vast, open ocean. This was not the familiar Atlantic, but an entirely separate body of water. He had shown the Pacific Ocean, a full decade before the Spanish explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa is historically credited with being the first European to sight it from a peak in Panama in 1513. How was this possible? This is a mystery of prescience, of a map that seemed to know a geographical truth the European world was not yet ready to officially acknowledge. Scholars have long pondered the sources Waldseemüller and his colleague Matthias Ringman might have used in their workshop in Saint-Dié. They certainly had access to the latest Portuguese and Spanish reports circulating among scholars. The key likely lies with Amerigo Vespucci's accounts. Vespucci described sailing far down the eastern coast of South America, and from his calculations of longitude and his descriptions of the sheer volume of water flowing from great rivers, he may have logically deduced that this was not a narrow peninsula of Asia, but a massive continent with another sea on its far side. Waldseemüller, putting immense faith in this interpretation, drew the logical conclusion on his map. Another possibility points to leaks from the secretive Portuguese court, whose sailors, pushing ever further, may have gathered whispers or seen evidence of an open passage to the south. The map's accuracy regarding the Pacific is not perfect. It is more of a conceptual leap than a precise chart, but the leap itself is what stuns us. The Waldseemüller map captures that electrifying moment when deduction and fragmentary evidence crystallized into a new vision of the world. It was a vision so advanced that even its creators seemed to doubt it later. Waldseemüller himself removed the name America from his later maps, yet the seed was planted. This map challenges the neat timeline of discovery, suggesting that the greatest leaps in understanding are not always made by the first person to see something, but by the first person bold enough to believe the evidence and draw it, giving a silent ocean a space on the page long before it had a name in the world. The Waldseemüller map's bold deduction gave a name to a continent, but another chart, drawn over 2 centuries later, would attempt to define a land that had no name at all. In 1737, the French geographer Philippe Buache presented a map that was not a record of discovery, but a declaration of theory. He proposed the existence of a vast southern continent, Antarctica, at a time when no explorer had ever seen it, and no ship had ever breached its icy perimeter. His vision, however, was shockingly specific. Buache did not draw a single, solid landmass. Instead, he depicted Antarctica as 2 large, separate continents, divided by a frozen sea that ran from the pole toward the Atlantic Ocean. He based this on a popular 18th century idea called the theory of continental symmetry, which suggested landmasses in the northern hemisphere would be balanced by similar landmasses in the south. It was a philosophical and mathematical guess, an exercise in elegant geometry applied to the blank spaces on the globe. For over 100 years, Buache's map was seen as just that, an interesting but incorrect hypothesis. Then, in the mid-20th century, something extraordinary happened. Modern technology, using radar and seismic sounding, finally pierced the Antarctic ice sheet to reveal the true shape of the land beneath. The subglacial topography showed a continent not of one single mass, but of 2 major landmasses, East Antarctica and West Antarctica, separated by a deep, vast trough, the Transantarctic mountain range. To many observers, the resemblance to Buache's theoretical split continent was startling. This is where the mystery crystallizes. Was Philippe Buache simply a brilliant theorist who made an astonishingly lucky guess based on symmetry and fragments of sailors' reports about icebergs and cold currents? Or did he have access to something more? The 18th century was an age of global exploration, and secretive trading companies or national navies often hoarded information. Could reports from an unknown, failed expedition into the Southern Ocean have reached Buache's desk in Paris? Perhaps a ship, blown far off course, glimpsed a mountain range through the ice fog and reported a sea channel where none should exist. These lost logs, if they ever existed, would have provided the raw, misunderstood data that Buache then framed within his elegant theory. His map blurs the line between scientific prophecy and whispered secret. It forces us to ask whether the greatest leaps in geography come from pure logic applied to emptiness, or from the faint, fading echo of a truth that arrived too early, waiting for its time to be understood again. A theory can be as powerful as a coastline when it guides the ships of an entire era. In 1531, the French mathematician and cartographer Oronce Finé crafted a world map of startling beauty and profound conviction. He drew the known continents within an elegant, heart-shaped projection, a cordiform map that symbolized a world unified by divine love and human reason. But it is the land he placed at the very bottom of this heart that captures our attention, a vast, sprawling continent labeled Terra Australis. This was not a new idea. The notion of a great southern landmass, a necessary counterweight to balance the northern continents, stretched back to the ancient Greek geographer Ptolemy. It was a philosophical imperative, a matter of cosmic symmetry. Yet Finé's rendition is something more. He does not sketch a vague outline. He gives this theoretical continent a detailed, jagged coastline, complete with capes, inlets, and even a prominent peninsula that appears to connect directly to the southern tip of South America. For a viewer in 1531, this map presented a clear, almost navigable reality. It declared that the southern continent was not just a possibility, but a geographical fact, waiting only for confirmation. The true mystery of Finé's map is not whether it was right or wrong. We know now that no such connected land bridge exists. The mystery lies in its immense power as a catalyst. This map and the enduring myth it represented became a self-fulfilling prophecy. For nearly 300 years, the idea of Terra Australis was the ghost in the machine of exploration. It sent captains like Quiros, Tasman, and Cook into the vast emptiness of the Southern Ocean with a specific destination in mind. They were not just wandering, they were searching for Finé's continent. When Abel Tasman mapped the west coast of New Zealand in 1642, he initially believed its mountainous shores were the northern promontory of the great southern land. James Cook's epic voyages in the late 1700s were, in part, commissioned to finally prove or disprove the myth once and for all. His meticulous charting of the Pacific systematically shrank the hypothetical continent, eventually replacing it with the reality of island chains and the isolated coast of Australia, a continent far smaller than the legendary Terra Australis. The culmination came later with the brutal, ice-locked discovery of the actual Antarctica, a continent that fulfilled the ancient prophecy of a southern land in the most extreme and unexpected way. So what are we to make of Oronce Finé's beautifully detailed era? It is a profound lesson in the psychology of discovery. The human mind abhors a vacuum, especially on a map. A blank space is an invitation for fear, for monsters, or for dreams. The myth of Terra Australis provided a dream so compelling, so logically elegant, that it organized centuries of effort and sacrifice. It gave explorers a target for their ambition and nations a reason to fund their voyages. The map did not reflect reality. It invented a goal that eventually created a new reality. In this way, the greatest mystery it solves is not about the shape of the Earth, but about the shape of human ambition. We do not merely find what is there, we often find what we desperately, rationally, or beautifully believe must be there. While European mapmakers were theorizing southern continents, a masterpiece of synthesis was being created on the other side of the world. In the royal court of Korea's Joseon dynasty, in the year 1402, scholars produced a map of breathtaking scope called the Kangnido. It is a vast, colorful panorama, not merely of Korea or China, but of the entire known world from an Asian perspective. To see it is to witness a different center of gravity. China, rendered with meticulous care, dominates the center, a testament to its cultural and political supremacy in the region. Korea and Japan are detailed with an insider's knowledge. But then, the map stretches far to the west, incorporating the entire Indian subcontinent, the Arabian Peninsula, and even the rough, unmistakable shapes of Africa and Europe, curled around the edges of the known Earth. This was decades before Portuguese caravels rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and over a century before Martin Waldseemüller would print his map naming America. The Kangnido presents a world already connected, at least in the minds of its creators. The central mystery here is not one of anachronistic landmasses, but of intellectual transmission. How did geographical knowledge of Africa and Europe, with their distinctive coastlines, travel all the way to a Korean palace in the early 15th century? The answer is written in the invisible lines of trade and scholarship. This map is a physical artifact of the Silk Road, not of goods but of ideas. Korean cartographers did not sail to the Mediterranean. Instead, they compiled their work from earlier Chinese maps, which in turn had absorbed knowledge from the Islamic world. Arab and Persian geographers, like the famed Al-Idrisi, had been producing sophisticated world maps for centuries, combining Greek learning with the reports of their own merchants and travelers who sailed the Indian Ocean and crossed the Sahara. This Islamic geographical corpus, representing the most advanced global understanding of its time, filtered eastward along overland routes and through maritime trade networks. The Kangnido is the magnificent result, a fusion of Mongolian administrative surveys, Chinese cosmological tradition, and Middle Eastern empirical data. It challenges a deeply ingrained narrative by presenting a clear, visual fact. The age of exploration was not a European monopoly that suddenly enlightened a waiting world. It was the acceleration of a much older, continuous, and multidirectional conversation. A sophisticated, interconnected world you already existed, centered on Asia. The Kangnido's mystery asks us to reimagine the flow of knowledge. It suggests that the world was being mapped from multiple vantage points simultaneously, and that sometimes the most complete picture came not from the newest voyage, but from the oldest, most patient network of exchange. This map is a quiet, powerful reminder that discovery is rarely a singular event, but more often a collective inheritance passed hand to hand across continents and centuries. The most stubborn mysteries are not hidden lands, but hidden assumptions. As European ships began returning with maps sketched on deck under foreign stars, they faced a formidable opponent not of the sea, but of the library. This opponent was a man who had been gone for over 1,300 years. Claudius Ptolemy, a Greco-Roman scholar working in 2nd century Alexandria, never saw the world he so confidently described. His great work, the Geographia, was a theoretical masterpiece, a system for projecting the spherical Earth onto a flat surface using a grid of latitude and longitude. It came with a catalogue of coordinates for thousands of places, from Britain to the Malay Peninsula, and a set of world maps. For centuries, his text was lost to the Latin West, preserved only in the Arab world. Then, in the early 15th century, it was translated back into Latin and arrived in Italy like an intellectual thunderclap. Here was a complete mathematical framework for the entire world, a gift from antiquity. Printers rushed to produce beautiful editions of Ptolemaic maps, and they became the standard, the textbook of geography. The mystery of these maps is not what they show, but what they refused to let go of, long after the world had proven them wrong. Ptolemy had never sailed the Indian Ocean. He reasoned it must be a giant inland sea, like the Mediterranean, entirely enclosed by a southern arc of land connecting Africa to Asia. He also dramatically underestimated the size of the Earth and stretched Asia far to the east, making the distance from Europe to Asia seem much shorter than it was. These were understandable errors for his time. The true puzzle begins when we watch Renaissance cartographers, men who had access to Portuguese charts showing the open ocean south of Africa, carefully copying Ptolemy's enclosed Indian Ocean onto their new, updated world maps. They would often draw two worlds side by side, the Ptolemaic world and the modern world, as if unable to fully discard the old authority. This is a mystery of cognitive dissonance on a continental scale. Why would a navigator who had rounded the Cape of Good Hope still consult a map that showed it was impossible? The answer lies in the overwhelming power of textual authority over lived experience. For a millennium in Europe, true knowledge was believed to reside in ancient texts, in the works of Aristotle, Galen, and Ptolemy. These were not seen as fallible human opinions, but as revealed truth. Empirical evidence, the report of a salty sea captain, was considered anecdotal, potentially flawed, and certainly less dignified than the wisdom of the ancients. To challenge Ptolemy was not just to correct a map, it was to challenge the entire intellectual foundation of the world. The maps became a battleground between two ways of knowing. You can see the struggle literally drawn on the page, with new coastlines awkwardly grafted onto the old Ptolemaic frame, creating geographical monsters. This intellectual inertia constrained exploration itself. Columbus famously used Ptolemy's underestimated Earth size and overestimated Asia length to calculate his voyage west, which is why he was so convinced the islands he found were the Indies. Ptolemy's error, printed and revered, directly shaped the course of history. The slow, reluctant death of the Ptolemaic worldview is one of the great quiet revolutions. It was not overturned by a single voyage, but by the gradual, painful accumulation of data that finally outweighed the weight of tradition. The mystery here is a human one, a lesson in how the maps we inherit can become prisons for the mind, teaching us to see not what is, but what we have been told must be there, long after the horizon has shown us otherwise. The authority of ancient texts could shape continents, but a far older document reveals a map drawn not for philosophers, but for the practical hands of a miner. Tucked away in a museum in Turin, Italy, is a fragile piece of papyrus that shatters our timeline for the very idea of a map. Created around 1,150 years before the Common Era, during the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses IV, this is not a chart of the world or a mythical continent. It is a detailed, technical guide to a specific, harsh landscape in Egypt's eastern desert. Known as the Turin Papyrus Map, it is considered by many scholars to be the oldest surviving topographical map in existence. Its purpose was starkly utilitarian, to guide an expedition to the Wadi Hammamat region, famous for its prized Beckhan stone quarries and gold mines. The map depicts a dry river valley, the surrounding hills, the location of the quarry itself, and even the settlement where the workers lived. Distances between points are written in Egyptian units, and the map is oriented with south at the top, a practical choice likely based on the direction of the Nile's flow. What transforms this administrative tool into a profound mystery is its startling accuracy. The mapmaker didn't just draw symbols, he captured the actual topography. The shapes of the hills correspond to the real geology of the area, and the route drawn matches the actual path through the wadi. This precision raises a compelling question. How did ancient Egyptian surveyors achieve this level of cartographic fidelity over 3,000 years ago without theodolites, satellites, or even a simple magnetic compass? The answer lies in a lost world of practical genius. These were not philosophers contemplating the cosmos. They were specialists, scribes, and architects trained in the rigorous demands of building pyramids and temples. Their methods were likely a combination of meticulous observation and simple, brilliant technique. They may have used sighting rods and ropes for measuring distances, or perhaps employed a form of triangulation using known landmarks. The consistent flow of the Nile provided a natural north-south baseline for orientation across the country. The map itself, with its careful notation of resources like water wells and stone deposits, speaks of a deep, accumulated knowledge of the land, passed down through generations of expedition leaders. This papyrus dispels a persistent myth that sophisticated, scaled mapmaking was an invention of the Greeks or the Renaissance. Here, in a document meant for a foreman's hands, we see the clear, organized mind of a state that administered its territory with a cartographic precision we would not see again for centuries. The mystery of the Turin Papyrus is not one of anachronistic knowledge, but of forgotten mastery. It presents a quiet challenge, reminding us that some of humanity's greatest intellectual leaps were not recorded in grand philosophical texts, but on practical documents that guided the search for gold and stone, proving that the need to accurately navigate our world is as ancient as civilization itself. The Egyptian mapmaker sought gold in a physical desert, but another cartographer, centuries later, would chart a path to a different kind of treasure. High on a wall in Hereford Cathedral rests an object that seems to reject everything we have discussed so far. Created around the year 1300, the Hereford Mappa Mundi is a monumental map drawn on a single sheet of calfskin over 5 feet tall. To look at it with modern eyes is to be lost immediately. The coastlines are distorted, the continents are misshapen, and the whole world is crammed into a perfect circle with Jerusalem sitting rigidly at its heart. This is not a failure of geography, it is a triumph of a different kind of knowledge. The Mappa Mundi is not a tool for navigation, it is a spiritual encyclopedia, a visual sermon meant to explain the entire destiny of humankind according to medieval Christian belief. Its mystery lies not in what it gets wrong, but in the profound, internal logic of what it chooses to show. Why map a city when you can map a soul's journey? The map's structure is its first clue. East is placed at the top, the direction of the rising sun, and the Garden of Eden, which is depicted there in a walled circle. At the very center is Jerusalem, the site of the crucifixion and resurrection, the pivotal moment in Christian history. This orientation tells the viewer that the most important direction is not north or south, but toward salvation. The physical world is arranged around this theological core. The continents of Asia, Europe, and Africa are present, but their shapes are secondary to the stories they contain. Scattered across the land and sea are hundreds of illustrations, tiny paintings that form a visual library of creation, history, and legend. You will find Noah's Ark resting on the mountains of Armenia, the Tower of Babel reaching skyward, and the labyrinth of the Minotaur on the island of Crete. Biblical events sit alongside accounts from classical history and medieval romance, all given equal cartographic reality. The edges of the world are populated with the marvelous and the monstrous, creatures like the Cyapod, a man who uses his single giant foot as a sunshade, or the Blemii, a race of people with their faces on their chests. These were not necessarily believed to be literal by every viewer, but they served a crucial purpose, marking the boundaries of the ordered, known world and the mysterious, untamed spaces beyond God's grace. This is where the map's true precision reveals itself. For a medieval Christian, the Mappa Mundi was geographically precise because it accurately charted the landscape of faith. It showed you where you stood in the grand narrative from creation to Judgment Day. It located the sites of saintly miracles and pivotal biblical events, creating a pilgrimage of the mind. The distance from London to Rome was less important than the spiritual distance from sin to redemption. To call this map inaccurate is to miss the point entirely, like criticizing a musical score for not being a good recipe. It was built for a different function. The Hereford Mappa Mundi presents us with a powerful mystery of meaning. It challenges our modern, utilitarian definition of a map. Can an object be considered a true map if its primary goal is not to guide a body through space, but to guide a spirit through time and doctrine? This magnificent artifact answers with a resounding yes. It maps a world where every mountain, river, and strange beast has a moral and a lesson, where geography is not the study of land, but the study of divine order. It reminds us that a map is always a reflection of what its culture values most, whether that is trade routes, gold mines, or the path to eternal life. Gold mines and spiritual journeys were not the only forces that shaped the medieval map. In a workshop on the island of Majorca, a different kind of masterpiece was being stitched together from threads of commerce, diplomacy, and pure wonder. The year is 1375, and the result is the Catalan Atlas, a work of such lavish detail that it feels less like a chart and more like a woven tapestry of the known world. Created by the Jewish cartographer Cresques Abraham, this atlas consists of 12 beautifully illustrated panels that unfold to tell a complete story. On the left, the Mediterranean is rendered with the crisp, practical precision of a Portolan chart, its coastlines dense with the names of ports and safe harbors, a direct tool for the navigator. But as your eye travels east and south, the map undergoes a breathtaking transformation. The rigid lines give way to a sprawling, painted landscape of imagination and report. Here is the Empire of Mali, ruled by the fabulously wealthy Mansa Musa, depicted as a black king enthroned, holding a golden orb. Here are the vast dominions of the Mongol ruler, the Great Khan, drawn from the accounts of travelers like Marco Polo who had ventured into that immense empire. The atlas is a living encyclopedia of 14th century global awareness, compiled at the crossroads of Christian, Jewish, and Islamic learning in Majorca. Its central mystery is a question of genre. Where on this magnificent page does the verified ledger of the spice merchant end, and where does the campfire tale of the caravan guide begin? The map does not distinguish, it presents them with equal conviction. We see the river of gold in West Africa, a real destination for traders seeking wealth, but also a place shrouded in legends of unimaginable riches. Most tellingly, the atlas includes the kingdom of the mythical Prester John, a legendary Christian monarch believed to rule a powerful, lost kingdom somewhere in the depths of Asia or Africa, a hoped-for ally against Islamic powers. For the mapmaker and his patrons, these were not necessarily fantasies, but unverified reports, possibilities that existed on the same spectrum as the accurately charted coast of Catalonia. This hybrid nature reveals the atlas's true purpose. It was not merely a tool to get from Barcelona to Alexandria. It was a strategic document for kings and merchants, a visualization of the world's opportunities and perils. It mapped hope in the form of Prester John's potential alliance. It mapped fear in the monstrous races said to dwell at the edges. And above all, it mapped aspiration in the gleaming image of Mansa Musa's gold. The Catalan Atlas is mysterious because it refuses to separate geography from desire. It shows us that to understand the world, the medieval mind needed to chart both its tangible markets and its intangible dreams, believing that the path to one might just lead to the other. The Atlas of Aspirations was not the only masterpiece emerging from the Mediterranean's crossroads. Sometime between 1411 and 1415, another mapmaker was at work, likely in Venice, creating what many scholars believe could have been the single most accurate world map of its era. We know it today only by the name of its creator, Albertin de Verga. His circular world map, now tragically fragmented, survives in just 2 pieces, a heartbreaking glimpse of a lost whole. What remains is enough to stun anyone familiar with the geography of the time. It shows the entire continent of Africa, not as a distorted peninsula trailing off into unknown waters, but as a distinct, navigable landmass clearly surrounded by ocean. This was drawn more than 70 years before the Portuguese explorer Bartolomeu Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1488, and nearly a century before Vasco da Gama reached India. The de Verga map presents a geographical fact on parchment decades, if not generations, ahead of its official discovery. The mystery here is not just what it shows, but the profound silence that surrounds it. Albertin de Verga himself is a ghost in the historical record. We have his name, his likely Venetian origin, and this map, beyond that, almost nothing. This obscurity makes the map's sophistication all the more haunting. It was not a crude sketch. It was a scientific instrument, incorporating a sophisticated calendar and a detailed zodiac ring, suggesting its creator was an astronomer and mathematician of high skill. This level of integrated knowledge points to a mind working within a rich tradition, not in isolation. So where did de Verga get his data? The map's timing and location offer compelling clues. Venice in the early 1400s was a clearinghouse for global intelligence. Its merchants and diplomats spanned from London to Alexandria, gathering reports from Arab caravans and sailors on the Indian Ocean. One compelling theory suggests de Verga had access to Arab sailing charts, or portolani, which had for centuries accurately mapped the Indian Ocean and the eastern coast of Africa. Arab geographers knew the African continent was surrounded by water, a fact recorded as early as the 12th century by the scholar Al-Idrisi. This knowledge, flowing into Venice through trade, could have reached de Verga's workshop. Another, more tantalizing possibility involves the Portuguese. Prince Henry the Navigator's school of cartography was already active, sending ships down the West African coast in secretive voyages. Could a stolen copy of a Portuguese chart or a whispered report from a sailor have made its way to Venice? This would make the De Verga map an astonishing act of cartographic espionage, capturing a state secret before it was fully realized by the state itself. The map's fragmentary state deepens the enigma. It represents the archetype of the lost masterpiece, a single, brilliant data point suggesting a parallel stream of geographical understanding that flourished briefly and then was nearly erased. Its accuracy implies that the age of discovery was not a sudden European awakening, but the gradual, often clandestine, merging of multiple pools of knowledge, European, Arab, and possibly Asian, onto a single sheet of vellum. The De Verga map asks a haunting question: how many other works of this caliber were created, used, and then simply worn away by time, leaving our historical narrative permanently skewed toward the documents that happened to survive? It is a reminder that history is not just written by the victors, but also preserved by the fragile durability of paper and ink. While European and Arab mapmakers were charting oceans, a different kind of network was being mapped from within the heart of the Ming dynasty. Tucked away for centuries in Oxford's Bodleian Library, a large, colorful scroll was simply labeled as a Chinese map. When scholars finally gave it a closer look in 2008, they realized it was a revelation. Known now as the Selden Map, this artifact from the early 1600s does not celebrate imperial borders or celestial order. Instead, it charts the lifeblood of early modern Asia, its commerce. The map is a stunningly detailed portrait of the South China Sea and the intricate maritime world of Southeast Asia. From the coast of China, it fans out like a spider's web, with thin red lines tracing shipping routes to ports in Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, and all the way to the Spice Islands of the Indonesian archipelago. These are not vague suggestions but precise navigational highways, each marked with compass bearings in Chinese characters, providing a practical guide for any merchant captain. Its accuracy regarding the shape of coastlines and the relative positions of islands is remarkable, born from the accumulated, hard-won experience of countless voyages. The mystery of the Selden Map is not about anachronistic continents, but about an entire world of knowledge operating in the shadows of official history. Who made this and for whom? The map lacks the grand seals and formal style of a court document. The prevailing theory is that it was created by or for a Chinese merchant, a practical tool for a trading consortium. This is what makes it so revolutionary. Official Chinese cartography of the era, the kind commissioned by the emperor, often presented a Zeno-centric view of the world, emphasizing tributary relationships and philosophical ideals over practical geography. The state archives mapped power and ideology. The Selden Map, by contrast, charts profit and connection. It shows a China deeply embedded in a vibrant, multilateral Asian economy, its merchants navigating a complex web of independent ports and polities long before European East India companies arrived in force. Its rediscovery forces a profound question onto the historical record. How much of the world's true geographical understanding was held not in royal libraries or state bureaus, but in the logbooks of merchants, the memory of pilots, and the private charts of trading houses? These were the living maps constantly updated with new information about currents, safe harbors, and market prices, documents considered too valuable or too mundane to be preserved in official archives. The Selden Map is a rare survivor of that bustling, pragmatic world. It is a ghost network made visible, a single, magnificent clue suggesting that the most accurate map of an era might not be the one that declares authority from a palace wall, but the one that quietly guided a ship safely to a foreign shore, laden with silk and porcelain, connecting continents one profitable voyage at a time. The bustling merchant networks of the Selden Map had a philosophical ancestor, a work born not in a counting house but in a royal palace dedicated to pure understanding. In the 12th century, the Norman King Roger II of Sicily presided over one of the most intellectually vibrant courts in the Mediterranean, a crossroads of Latin, Greek, and Islamic learning. His ambition was not merely to conquer territory, but to comprehend the world. To fulfill this, he commissioned a scholar from the Islamic world, Muhammad Al-Idrisi, to lead a monumental project. For 15 years, Al-Idrisi and a team of researchers interviewed travelers, analyzed existing maps from across cultures, and synthesized their findings into a work of staggering scope called the Tabula Rogeriana, or the Book of Roger. This was not a single map, but an expansive geographical text accompanied by a large, detailed silver planisphere and 70 sectional maps. The world it presented was the most advanced representation of its time, a seamless fusion of Greek geographical theory, the latest Islamic empirical data from merchants and sailors, and even the raw reports of Viking navigators about the northern seas. The map itself is oriented with south at the top, following the convention of many Arab cartographers, which immediately signals its different perspective. Its accuracy for the Mediterranean basin, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Indian Ocean is remarkable, detailing cities, mountain ranges, and trade routes with a precision that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. The core mystery of Al-Idrisi's masterpiece is not one of hidden continents, but of unfulfilled potential. Here was a collaborative, cosmopolitan project that deliberately wove together the best knowledge from every available tradition. It was a living argument for the power of synthesis over isolation. So why did this pinnacle of medieval geography not immediately ignite a global revolution in exploration? The answer lies in the fragile ecology of knowledge. The Tabula Rogeriana was a product of a specific golden moment in Sicily, where a curious Christian king actively patronized Muslim and Jewish scholars. This open exchange was the exception, not the rule. When King Roger passed, the political and intellectual climate shifted. The work was translated into Latin and circulated among scholars, but it remained a luxury object, a treasure for libraries rather than a practical tool for ship captains. Its very sophistication may have worked against its widespread adoption, as its detailed, text-heavy format was less easily reproduced and used than the simpler Portolan charts that were emerging for navigation. Furthermore, the tradition it represented required stable patronage and cross-cultural dialogue, conditions that grew increasingly rare in the centuries that followed with the rise of crusading fervor and the hardening of religious boundaries. Al-Idrisi's map thus stands as a haunting what-if. It demonstrates that a highly accurate world picture was possible long before the age of discovery, but it also reveals that knowledge alone is not enough. For a geographical revolution to take hold, it needs not just accurate data, but the means for widespread dissemination, the economic motive for application, and a society willing to act on what it learns. The Tabula Rogeriana captured the world in stunning detail, yet for a long time the world was not quite ready to use it. Venice in the 1430s was a city of whispers, where the most valuable cargo was not silk or spice, but a scrap of information. In the workshop of the cartographer Andrea Bianco, such whispers were transformed into lines on vellum. His world map of 1436 is a masterpiece of the Portolan tradition, its central Mediterranean rendered with the confident, dense web of room lines that guided sailors from port to port. But it is the left-hand margin of the chart, where the known world bleeds into the vast Atlantic, that holds a quiet intrigue. Here, Bianco sketches the northwestern bulge of Africa with a clarity that was advanced for its time. And scattered in the ocean to the west, he places a chain of islands. Some are the mythical isles of medieval legend, but others bear a striking resemblance to the real archipelagos of the Azores and the Cape Verde Islands. This is the heart of the mystery. The Portuguese would not officially discover and colonize the Azores until around 1439, and the Cape Verde Islands not until around 1456. So what was a Venetian mapmaker doing charting them with apparent knowledge 3 years before and 2 decades before those official dates? The map suggests a world of exploration happening in the shadows. Official history loves clear dates and named captains, but the ocean was not empty before those dates. For generations, fishermen from Bristol, Brittany, and Galicia had been pushing further into the Atlantic in search of cod and whales. Geno's sailors, rivals to the Venetians, were famed for their daring and may have launched unofficial expeditions down the African coast, their logs never entering the royal archives. These men operated on the fringe of the known, their discoveries passing not through courts but through taverns, dockside exchanges, and the networks of chart makers who paid for good information. Andrea Bianco was likely a node in this informal intelligence network. A sailor returns to Lisbon or Seville with a tale of new islands on the horizon. A rough sketch is made, that sketch is traded or sold, and eventually a copy finds its way to a meticulous craftsman in Venice who integrates it into his grand synthesis. The islands on Bianco's map may not be perfectly placed, but their presence is a data point, a leak in the system of state-controlled knowledge. This transforms the Bianco map from a simple artifact into a profound argument. It tells us that the map of the world was often pieced together from the bottom up, from the collective, incremental experience of hundreds of unnamed mariners who ventured a little further each season. Their discoveries slowly percolated into the cartographic mainstream, creating documents that appear prescient because they were compiled from the leading edge of lived experience, not from royal decrees. The official chroniclers would later award the glory to a prince's sponsored captain, but the lines on the vellum often got there first, drawn by a hand that listened carefully to the whispers of the sea. A world of whispers demanded a world of defenses. In the year 1519, as Portuguese carracks dominated the spice routes and Spanish galleons hauled silver from the New World, a rival power decided it needed a key to their locked world. The result was not a spy's coded letter, but an object of breathtaking beauty, a volume known as the Miller Atlas. This was a collaborative masterpiece, its maps drawn by Portuguese cartographers, but its lavish illuminations. The gold leaf, the painted cities, the vivid depictions of exotic peoples and animals executed by French artists in the workshop of a man named Lopo Homem. It was commissioned as a gift for King Francis I of France, a monarch whose own ambitions for overseas empire were being thwarted by the papal treaty that divided the globe between Portugal and Spain. The atlas was a diplomatic treasure, a work of art meant to flatter and impress, but beneath its gilded surface, it was also an act of high-stakes cartographic espionage. Here, in pages meant for a royal library, were some of the most precise and detailed maps of Brazil and the Indian Ocean yet produced, secrets that Lisbon guarded as fiercely as any fortress. How did this happen? The mystery of the Miller Atlas is not in its coastlines, which are brilliantly accurate for their time, but in the dangerous journey of the knowledge they contain. Did the Portuguese cartographers, Lopo Homem and the Reis family, willingly share their state's most precious data with a foreign king, perhaps for personal profit or under political pressure? Or was the information subtly extracted, copied from official charts under the guise of artistic collaboration? The atlas itself is a silent witness to this clandestine transaction. It presents the world not as a philosophical concept, but as a portfolio of commercial and strategic opportunities. The coast of Brazil is shown rich with Brazilwood, a lucrative dye source. The Indian Ocean is charted with its monsoon winds and key ports, a direct guide to the pepper and cinnamon trades. For King Francis, this was not just a beautiful book, it was a battle plan and a prospectus, revealing exactly where his rival's wealth came from and where he might insert his own ships. This transforms the map from a tool of navigation into a weapon of statecraft and a commodity of immense value. The Miller Atlas makes one thing starkly clear. In the cutthroat competition of the Age of Discovery, knowledge of the world was the ultimate currency, and the cartographer's workshop was as crucial to national security as the admiral's fleet. The true voyage recorded in these glowing pages was not across the sea, but from a locked cabinet in Lisbon to an eager king's hands in Paris, proving that sometimes the most treacherous waters to cross were those of international intrigue. But the art of the mapmaker was not confined to secret gifts and stolen intelligence. In the bustling French port of Dieppe, a whole school of cartographers turned speculation into a lavish, consistent vision of the world. Throughout the mid-1500s, workshops in this town produced a series of breathtakingly ornate maps, known today as the Deep Maps. Charts like the Harleian map or the Dauphin map are not just navigational tools. They are works of art filled with elaborate illustrations, royal coats of arms, and ships sailing across seas of vivid blue. Yet for all their decoration, they present a geographical puzzle that has divided historians for generations. On their eastern edges, these maps consistently show a massive landmass south of the islands of Indonesia. They label it Java La Grande or Greater Java. Its northern coastline bears a startling resemblance to the actual northern coast of Australia, from the Gulf of Carpentaria all the way around to what we now call Arnhem Land. This depiction appears decades, even a century, before the first confirmed European landings on the continent by Dutch explorers in the early 1600s, and over 2 centuries before Captain Cook's famous mapping of the eastern coast. So what exactly are we looking at? The mystery of the Deep School is one of a sustained collective belief. This was not a single mapmaker's wild guess, but a whole tradition of charting that held firm to this specific geography. The leading theory points to the Portuguese. By the early 1500s, Portuguese ships had reached the Spice Islands of the East Indies. From there, it is entirely plausible that a vessel was blown off course by a monsoon, sighting the northern shores of Australia. Portuguese exploration was famously secretive, and such a discovery would have been a state secret. Yet, through captured sailors, shared portolan charts, or the loose talk of merchants, this fragment of knowledge could have leaked to the neutral French port of Dieppe, where its cartographers incorporated it into their world picture. The alternative explanation is more literary. These maps could be an ambitious but mistaken interpretation of the travel writings of Marco Polo. In his accounts, Polo described a large, wealthy island called Java, and he mentioned a vast southern land. It is possible that deep mapmakers, trying to reconcile these old texts with new reports from the Indies, dramatically enlarged Java and attached it to a theoretical southern continent, creating the phantom of Java La Grande by stitching together rumor and legend. The debate hinges on the map's intriguing details. Some show rivers flowing north from Java La Grande into the sea, which could correspond to real river systems in northern Australia. Others depict the interior with illustrations of European kings and elephants, clear fantasy. This blend of plausible coastline and obvious imagination is what makes the mystery so enduring and so difficult to solve. The deep maps stand as a testament to the power of a shared story among geographers. They represent a cohesive school of thought that charted a continent that may have been seen, but was not yet known. They ask us whether a coastline drawn with such consistent conviction across multiple works is more likely to be a collective fantasy, or the quiet, persistent echo of a truth that sailed into view once, was recorded in secret, and then was lost again to everything except the memory of the mapmaker's pens. While the deep mapmakers speculated from afar, the first man to actually stand on those new shores held a very different truth in his mind. In the port of Santa Maria in Spain, the year 1500, a navigator named Juan de la Cosa unrolled a large piece of parchment and began to draw a world only he and a few others had ever seen. His map is the oldest surviving European chart that unquestionably depicts the Americas. As the owner of Columbus's flagship, the Santa Maria, and a veteran of his first 2 voyages, de la Cosa was not relying on whispers or stolen reports. He was drawing from direct eyewitness experience. The map shows the Caribbean islands with a startling clarity, the bulging coast of Brazil discovered by Pedro Alves Cabral, and the northern coastline of South America. It is a priceless snapshot of the world as known by the earliest explorers. Yet, in its most defining feature, the map presents a profound psychological mystery. Look to the north, above the islands of Cuba and Hispaniola. De la Cosa draws a continuous, unbroken coastline that runs off the edge of the parchment to the northeast. He inscribes it with flags of Castile and labels it Asia. This was not a simple error of surveying. This was a cartographic declaration of faith, a direct reflection of Christopher Columbus's unshakable and ultimately incorrect conviction. Despite all the evidence before his eyes, the unfamiliar plants, the strange animals, the entirely new peoples, Columbus insisted until his dying day that he had reached the outer islands of the Indies, just off the coast of Cathay. Juan de la Cosa, loyal to his admiral and steeped in the same expectations, drew the world to fit that belief. The coastline is a phantom, a bridge of hope and dogma connecting the new discoveries to the old dream. The mystery here is not one of hidden knowledge but of filtered perception. How could someone with such first-hand data produce a map that so stubbornly denies the reality of what he had mapped? The map becomes a window into the powerful human tendency to see what we expect to see. Every new piece of information, from the shape of a bay to the flow of a river, was interpreted through the lens of a pre-existing theory. The native peoples were not citizens of a new continent, they were Indians. The islands were not a new world, they were the Antilles, a gateway to the riches of the East. This cognitive bias was so strong it overrode the evidence of the senses and was literally etched into the historical record. De la Cosa's map is therefore one of our most honest historical documents. It does not show us the world as it was, but the world as it was desperately wished to be by the men who first charted it. It captures the exact moment when discovery collided with delusion, when the blank spaces on the map were filled not with unknown potential, but with the comforting contours of an old fantasy. This teaches us a subtle but vital lesson about all maps and indeed all exploration. The greatest obstacle to understanding a new frontier is rarely a lack of information. It is the weight of the stories we already carry with us, stories so powerful they can bend a coastline on parchment and blind us to the continent unfolding right before our eyes. The mind of a Renaissance scholar could hold an entire universe within a single, sprawling vision. In the year 1587, a Milanese nobleman and polymath named Urbano Monti completed a work of such staggering scale and eccentricity that it defies simple categorization. This was not merely a map, it was a 60-sheet manuscript atlas designed to be assembled into a single, giant planisphere over 9 feet in diameter. Its projection was revolutionary for its time, an azimuthal view centered directly on the North Pole, allowing the continents to radiate outward like the petals of a vast geographical flower. This alone was a brilliant cartographic innovation, a way to depict global relationships that the more common rectangular projections distorted. But the true mystery of the Urbano Monti planisphere lies not in its mathematics, but in its magnificent, bewildering content. It is a one-man encyclopedia of the late Renaissance world, a place where the latest reports from Spanish and Portuguese navigators coexist seamlessly with biblical kings, mythical beasts, and the learned speculations of ancient authorities. Here, the coastlines of Japan and California are drawn with a surprising degree of accuracy, based on the most current accounts available to a well-connected Italian scholar. Yet these realistic shores are populated with illustrations of the legendary Christian king Prester John ruling over Ethiopia, and of the monstrous races long believed to inhabit the earth's edges. A unicorn might graze near a correctly charted river delta, and the winds are personified as cherubic faces blowing across the oceans. Monte's map is a universe in harmony, but a harmony dictated by the mind of its creator. This creates a fascinating puzzle for the modern viewer. Are we looking at the work of a misguided eccentric who could not separate fact from fable? Or are we witnessing the final, glorious expression of a worldview that was about to vanish forever? Urbano Monte lived at the precise tipping point of history, the age of the universal scholar for whom geography was inseparable from theology, zoology, and classical literature, was giving way to the age of the specialist, the empirical navigator, and the scientific cartographer. His map is a mysterious culmination, a last, magnificent attempt to capture everything known and believed about the world within a single, unified system. It represents geography not as a practical science of coastlines, but as a moral and philosophical landscape, where every creature and king had a symbolic place in God's creation. The Planisphere's mystery is its refusal to acknowledge the coming split between myth and measurement. In its sprawling, beautiful pages, the whole of human understanding, from hard-won navigational data to enduring cultural dreams, still fits together perfectly, a final, breathtaking portrait of a world that was already beginning to fade away. A map drawn in Constantinople could feel the tremors of a world turning upside down. By the middle of the 17th century, the Ottoman Empire remained a colossal power, its territories spanning 3 continents. Yet in the quiet scriptoriums of Istanbul, a subtle but profound shift was occurring on parchment. The scholar and encyclopedist Katip Celebi, one of the empire's great intellectual figures, undertook a monumental task to compile a new world geography. His seminal work, the Sihanuma or View of the World, was not created from nothing. It leaned heavily on earlier Ottoman cartographers like Rustam, but its true source of wonder was its direct and deliberate incorporation of the latest European maps, particularly those of the Dutch masters Gerardus Mercator and Willem Blieu. Here, in elegant Ottoman script, were the coastlines of the Americas, the outlines of the Great Lakes, and the contours of a planet that had been radically reshaped by explorers from the rival Christian world. The maps themselves are not mysterious for their inaccuracy, but for what their very existence represents, a quiet, strategic act of intellectual translation. For centuries, the Islamic world had been the primary custodian of global geographical knowledge, its scholars synthesizing Greek, Persian, and first-hand travel accounts into works like Al-Idrisi's Tabula Rogeriana. The Ottoman Empire, as its heir, had once led this tradition, but now the fountainhead of new cartographic data was not in Baghdad, Cairo, or Istanbul. It was in Amsterdam and Lisbon. Katip Celebi's work captures the exact, mysterious moment when a proud civilization, facing a new geopolitical reality, chose to look outward and absorb. The mystery lies in the cultural negotiation happening on the page. How does an empire accustomed to being the mapmaker for others become the careful student of its rivals? The maps of Celebi and his predecessors like Rustam are not slavish copies. They are integrations filtering European discoveries through an Islamic cosmological and linguistic framework. Place names are transliterated, commentary is added from Arabic and Persian sources, and the whole is presented within a familiar scholarly tradition. This process of adaptation is a profound psychological recalibration. It is the cartographic equivalent of listening carefully at the door to a room where the future is being drawn. These maps symbolize a reluctant but necessary acknowledgement that the center of geographical innovation had shifted west. The mystery is not one of hidden coastlines, but of quiet intellectual resilience. In commissioning and creating these works, the Ottoman elite were not admitting defeat. They were engaging in a form of strategic catching up, ensuring their navigators, diplomats, and merchants were not operating with an obsolete picture of the world. It was an act of preservation through adaptation. The lines on Katip Celebi's maps trace more than rivers and mountains. They trace the fragile path of a great culture navigating an age of disruptive change, choosing to remap its own understanding in order to remain on the map of global power at all. A new kind of map was needed to contain the world's multiplying contradictions. In the year 1570, a Flemish scholar and engraver named Abraham Ortelius published a book in Antwerp that quietly changed the rules of the game. He called it the Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, the theater of the world. It was not a single grand chart, but a bound collection of 53 uniform maps, all engraved to the same scale and style. This was the first true modern atlas. Its mystery is not hidden in any one coastline or phantom island, but in the revolutionary act of compilation itself. By gathering the best available maps from across Europe, Spanish charts of the Americas, Portuguese portlands of the Indies, German maps of the heartland, and placing them side by side within a single volume, Ortelius performed a profound act of cartographic synthesis. For the first time, a scholar in his study could flip from a map of Africa to a map of Asia and see how they were supposed to connect. This simple, elegant format created a new kind of clarity, but it also generated a new kind of anxiety. The mystery of Ortelius's atlas is a meta-mystery, a puzzle about the nature of knowledge. When you bring all the world's fragments together, you do not just create a complete picture, you expose the glaring gaps and jarring inconsistencies between them. One map might show a vast inland sea in Asia, while another shows a mountain range in the same spot. The northern coast of Asia might simply trail off into emptiness on one page, while the next page implied a connection to America. The atlas made collective ignorance visible, measurable, and urgent. It was no longer a matter of individual sailors' rumors, but a documented, published problem. This organized presentation of the known world had a paradoxical effect. It did not satisfy curiosity, it systematized it. Now, the blank spaces were not just frightening voids at the edge of a single chart, they were catalogued absences in a global index. A merchant or a monarch could point to a specific, standardized page and say, "We do not know what is here." This transformed exploration from a series of haphazard ventures into a targeted, intellectual pursuit. The atlas became a checklist for discovery. Ortelius himself understood this. He included a list of the cartographers whose work he used, and he promised to issue updated editions as new information arrived. His book was not a final statement, but a living argument for perpetual revision. The true power of the format, then, was its ability to turn geography into a conversation. It presented the world as a work in progress, a theater where the next act was always being written by the next voyage. By organizing knowledge so perfectly, it revealed just how imperfect that knowledge still was, lighting a fire under the feet of every explorer who saw its pages. The atlas did not just map the world, it mapped the very desire to keep mapping. Giovanni da Verrazzano saw a continent through a keyhole. In the spring of 1524, the Florentine explorer, sailing under the French flag, made landfall near what is now North Carolina. He was searching for a passage to the Pacific, a shortcut to the riches of Asia. What he found was a chain of long, sandy barrier islands, and behind them, the calm, shallow waters of the Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds. From the deck of his ship, looking through the inlets, this appeared to be a vast body of water stretching westward to the horizon. His mind, primed by hope and the theories of the day, made a monumental leap. He did not see a coastal lagoon. He believed he was looking at the beginning of the Pacific Ocean, separated from the Atlantic by only a slender spit of land. This single, localized misperception was about to reshape the map of a continent. Back in Europe, cartographers took Verrazzano's report and gave it definitive form. They drew the eastern seaboard, and then, just behind the thin line of the Outer Banks, they sketched a massive inland sea. They labeled it the Sea of Verrazzano. On parchment, it was no longer a guess, it was geography. This sea began appearing on influential maps for decades, a phantom ocean that promised easy access to the spices of the East. The mystery here is not one of fraud, but of contagious conviction. How could a mistake born from a restricted view from a ship's deck become a fixed feature on the world stage? The answer lies in the fragile chain of trust that defined early cartography. A respected explorer provided a report. A skilled mapmaker who had never crossed the Atlantic translated that verbal report into ink. Other mapmakers, seeing this new detail on a respected chart, copied it. With each copy, the Sea of Verrazzano gained authority. It moved from being one man's interpretation to an accepted fact of continental geography. This had real-world, costly consequences. The promise of this sea directly influenced early colonization plans. Expeditions were launched with the specific goal of finding this waterway, believing they could sail straight through to the Pacific. Settlements were planned around its hypothetical shores. Years of effort and resources were poured into searching for a coastline that was nothing more than a reflection on calm, shallow sound waters. The fantasy only died when later explorers, like the English from their Jamestown settlement, pushed inland and found not an ocean but forests, rivers, and the imposing wall of the Appalachian Mountains. The slow, painful correction of the map was a lesson written in failed expeditions. The Sea of Verrazzano stands as a perfect monument to a profound truth about how we come to know our world. It demonstrates that a map is not a direct recording of reality. It is a filtered image shaped by hope, interpreted through theory, and then hardened by reputation. A single error, if it arrives at the right time from the right source, can take on a life of its own, guiding ships and deciding fates, until the land itself finally says no. The edge of the known world was not a blank space, but a story waiting to be told. Among the most poignant of these stories is written on a sphere of copper no larger than a grapefruit, crafted in Europe around the year 1510. Known as the Lennox globe, it is one of the very earliest surviving globes to depict the New World, a tiny, tangible record of a planet suddenly grown larger. Its coastlines are a fascinating mix of the accurate and the speculative, but its true voice is heard not in a shape but in a phrase. On the southeastern edge of Asia, in the region we would now call the Indonesian archipelago, the engraver carefully inscribed two words in Latin, HCSVNTDRACONES. Here are dragons. This simple declaration transforms the globe from a scientific instrument into a capsule of human psychology. What did those words truly mean to the person who etched them into the copper? The most literal interpretation is also the most haunting, that the mapmaker, or his sources, genuinely believed monstrous, serpentine creatures lurked in those distant islands. Medieval bestiaries and travelers' tales were filled with such accounts, and placing them on the very edge of the map served as a stark, symbolic warning for any sailor dreaming of venturing too far. It marked a boundary not just of geography but of safety, yet the phrase could also be read as a kind of cartographer's shorthand, an inside joke or a professional convention. For centuries, mapmakers had used Latin phrases like hic sunt leones, here are lions, to denote dangerous, unexplored territories in Africa. Dragons were simply the more dramatic, fitting monster for the mysterious East. In this light, HCSVNTDRACONES was not a zoological claim, but a sophisticated code, meaning, beyond this point, we have no reliable data, and you proceed at your own peril. It was a placeholder for ignorance dressed in the gripping costume of myth. This tiny globe held in the palm of a hand, captures the precise moment when two ways of understanding the world were fused. The engraver was using the rigorous mathematical form of a globe, a model of the spherical Earth based on the latest navigational reports, but into that scientific framework, he poured the ancient language of folklore. The dragons were a bridge. They gave form to the formless fear of the utterly unknown, making the terrifying void at the edge of the maps something concrete, something that could be named and, in a strange way, managed. To inscribe "Here are dragons" was to assert a fragile human control over the abyss of ignorance. It said, "We may not know what is there, but we know it is fearsome, and we have marked it." The Lennox globe's enduring mystery asks us to sit with that contradiction. It presents a world being measured with new precision, yet still explained through old stories. The dragons were not an error, they were a necessary myth, a psychological tool that allowed the age of discovery to push forward into the darkness, one terrifying, legendary beast at a time. The dragons were a warning for the unknown, but a far more stubborn phantom would haunt the charts of North America for 300 years. Our final mystery is not one of ancient knowledge, but of a dream that refused to die, even as the maps themselves grew more detailed and more damning. In 1776, as the American colonies declared their independence, the Venetian publisher Antonio Zatta produced a lavish atlas of the world. His map of North America is a beautiful object filled with delicate script and the latest geographical data from French and British surveys. Yet, in the continent's frozen northwest, Zatta drew a clear, open channel of water cutting straight from the Atlantic to the Pacific. He labeled it the Strait of Anian, the fabled Northwest Passage. This was no vague suggestion. It is presented as a geographic fact, a navigable route waiting for the right ship and the bold captain. The mystery here is not one of ignorance but of persistence. By 1776, generations of explorers had probed the Arctic labyrinth. Men like Martin Frobisher, Henry Hudson, and James Cook had encountered only ice-choked channels, brutal cold, and dead ends. The evidence was mounting that if a passage existed at all, it was a frozen, useless gauntlet. So why did a respected European mapmaker, with access to the latest reports, continue to chart an open sea where there was only solid ice? The answer lies in the immense gravitational pull of human desire. The Northwest Passage was not just a route, it was an economic and strategic obsession. For any European power, controlling a direct sea lane to the riches of Asia would have been a geopolitical masterstroke, bypassing the long, dangerous voyages around Cape Horn or the Cape of Good Hope. The potential reward was so colossal that it warped the map. Patrons, whether kings or trading companies, wanted to see the possibility on paper. Mapmakers like Zatta, catering to that market, often chose hope over harsh reality, smoothing the ragged, icy coastlines into a plausible strait. It was a cartographic placebo, a comfort to planners and investors. This final map crystallizes a truth that has echoed through all 25 of our mysteries. A map is never a purely objective document. It is a negotiation between the evidence of the eye and the demands of the heart, between the sailor's logbook and the king's ambition. The continents on these charts were often captured not as they were, but as they were desperately needed to be, a blueprint for desire drawn in ink and hope. The Phantom Passage on Zatta's map is a perfect, poignant in point. It shows us that the last thing to be explored and corrected is not a coastline, but a dream, and that sometimes the most difficult terrain to map is the landscape of our own unwavering wishes. 25 maps have taken us on a voyage across centuries and continents, from the disputed shores of the Piri Reis chart to the stubborn dream of Zatta's open strait. We have seen coastlines drawn from whispers, continents born from theory, and oceans that existed only in the hopeful minds of kings and cartographers. Each of these documents, in its own way, is a kind of time capsule, but not one that simply preserves the past. It captures a specific, frozen moment in humanity's relentless, stumbling, and magnificent struggle to comprehend the planet it calls home. These are not just historical artifacts to be filed away. They are arguments etched in ink, dreams given shape on vellum, and puzzles that continue to whisper their riddles to anyone willing to look closely. Their lines trace more than geography. They trace the contours of human ambition itself. The greatest mystery these maps present may not be about lost civilizations or phantom islands, but about what they relentlessly reveal about us. They showcase our astonishing capacity for brilliant deduction, as when a scholar like Waldseemüller deduced a vast ocean he had never seen. They lay bare our profound susceptibility to error and dogma, as when de la Cosa drew Asia where a new world truly lay. And above all, they testify to our insatiable, driving curiosity, that force which sent ships into the blank spaces on the chart, determined to replace the dragons and the warnings with names and knowledge. Let these maps be an invitation. Let them inspire you to look at history not as a gallery of settled facts, but as an ongoing, global detective story, where every faded line is a clue and every blank space a question waiting for its answer. The legacy of these charts is an uncharted one, reminding us that our understanding of the world is always, and will always be, a work in progress. If these ancient documents have captivated your imagination, we would love to hear your thoughts. Which of these 25 mysterious maps did you find the most compelling or baffling? Share your choice in the comments below, and subscribe to join us as we continue to delve deeper into the world's greatest historical mysteries.